Hello everyone, and today I'm going to conclude and to end our entire book, The Outliers, written by Malcolm Gladwell. So it is such an important moment for me, and I hope for you too, because at this point I will conclude reading this in some sense intensive and hard for me textbook. And I'm really happy that I have taken so many useful information, so many useful thoughts and knowledge which will help you, first of all, my followers, and to me, which will help me to, in some sense, to achieve what I want to achieve in my future life. So, the epilogue. Epilogue is called the Jamaican story. First of all, let me start just from the story of one couple, Daisy and Donald Nation. Daisy and Donald Nation, they were teachers. They lived in Jamaica. They had two daughters, Joyce and Faith. At that time, when they lived, specifically in 20th century, it was very hard to make your children to study in the schools and to get the scholarship and even to study in the universities in England or United States of America, because at that point the Jamaica as a country was considered poor, and they had really some troubles with their educational system. And subsequently, those two daughters, Joyce and Faith, nevertheless, they had got the scholarship to the university. They graduated that university, and then they got married. And they had their own children, their own family. They moved to Canada. Some of them moved to America, and all was very, very good, and in some sense it was really the positive conclusion for the family who lived in Jamaica. Going from the poor level, poor group of society to the middle or even high group of society. At first sense, you might think it is easy, like going to the private school, going to the university, then get a job and get married. But if we look back, if we look more profoundly, and it is the same case as looking to the history of Bill Gates, Beatles, Joe Flom, Chris Landon, Robert Oppenheimer, and some other outliers, you can't say that they are just lucky. They are the products of history, of legacy, of their culture. And so from that point, I won't just in details describe you what is the history and what kind of role the history and legacy and culture played in the success of Joyce and Faith, the daughters of Daisy and Donald Nation. So, going back to the history of Jamaica, in 18th century, the majority of population was black. But on the other side, there were the high level of society. There was the high level of society as owners of some coffee plantation, sugarcane fields, and some other very huge businesses. And it is common, and it was very spread in order to obtain the big amount of slaves, women as well as men. And sometimes those owners, they made some relationship with those women. Subsequently, as a result, they had children, and those children were called mulatta. as being mulattoes, it was as a privilege, and in general, having the high skin or high tone of skin, being kind of olive, being light brown, or something light than the dark a tone of skin, were very privileged, and all aspects, such aspects as attitude among the society, authority, and respect, were promised because of the color of your skin. And therefore, mulattoes as well, they were able to be the part of higher social and also political ladder. Therefore, they were able to be the lawyers, the doctors, the journalists, and having some enough high positions in the society. And Daisy Nation wasn't an exception because she was a daughter of John Graham, and that child, John, he was a product of the relationship between Negra woman and the white man, the owner of coffee plantation. And therefore, Daisy, being the kind of product of that culture, she was a force. She always tried to make her family to be the higher in the social sense. Therefore, in the 19th century, she had been trying to make her daughters to get the best education and to be the part of the privileged society. She was trying to do the same as her ancestors had been trying to do. And she was a main force. In contrary to her husband, Donald, he was a dreamer, like a big dreamer, and he was just entirely busy with his books. Unfortunately, he didn't have such energy and such strong belief as Daisy had, because they had very different cultures. So the first thing is Daisy. Daisy was as a force, as a main power, and a main aspect which made her daughters so successful. The second one were her activities, because it was very hard at that time to send your children to be students of private schools, because usually, as I mentioned before, Jamaican educational systems, they were able to allow pupils to study in the schools up to 14 years old, and after that you just could take some additional classes, extra classes, or somehow to be a student of university in England or United States, but it was very hard and it required the high costs and cost for education. And Daisy and her family, they did that. They spent all their salaries, even annual salaries, for the education of Joyce, because fortunately Faith, she got the scholarship. She got the how it is called, the she got the scholarship, which was the product of the reform which was conducted 100 years ago, as a symbol of abortion of slavery. And so she got that scholarship. But her sister Joyce, she didn't. And so, nevertheless, Daisy was trying to make her two daughters to be the student of private schools and to be the students of university, and therefore, nevertheless, Donald, her husband, and she spent all their money for the tuition education of the Joyce. And after that, when she didn't got the scholarship to university, nevertheless, she paid the first term, and she asked God to have a fortune, have a luck to get that scholarship and to avoid very high costs and payments those they didn't have at all. And fortunately, Joyce, she got a scholarship at the end of the first term, and so and thus she became a student of university, where she met her husband Graham, and then they moved to Canada, and nowadays they have 3 sons. One son is called Malcolm Gladwell, the author of Outliers. So as you can see here, it is very hard when you look at the Outliers, when you think how have they achieved all what they have right now. And for example, looking at the history of Malcolm Gladwell and how Daisy, his grandmother, how she at that moment had been trying to find money. She also took some loans from some Chinese shopkeeper, and the loans, the amount of money were very high, but nevertheless she did that because she paid those money back very promptly, and she was able to teach the Chinese children who had troubles among Jamaican children in that century. And making some kind of decisions using her legacy, using her pattern from her legacy, she was able to make her daughter successful. And that is all about Outliers, and that is all about Bill Gates and all those successful people nowadays. And at the end of the chapter, Malcolm Gladwell just wanted to mark the very important idea that if those rights, if those opportunities were allocated equally, how many other Outliers would we have nowadays? And that's the really profound question, and you will find your own answer looking back at your own legacy and looking around you, looking around your contemporary world, looking around your reality, and ask yourself, what kind of opportunities do I have? What kind of opportunities I have right now? How can I apply them? How can I use them in order to be successful, in order to apply all my knowledge, skills, and talent, and go ahead and be the outlier. So thank you for being with me from the very beginning till that moment. I hope you really took something meaningful and substantial for you, and especially for your life. And I hope that you will absolutely achieve your purposes and your goals using the information which is given you from the book via my speech to you. Thank you so much for your attention. Goodbye.